Welcome to our Acrylic Portrait Painting Challenge Masterclass Lesson number 2, how to sketch your portrait for a firm foundation. I'm so excited that you're here and you're continuing in this challenge. It's my pleasure to be able to teach you how to paint a portrait you can be proud of. And today I'm going to teach you how to do a good sketch for your portrait. It's so important. You don't want to miss this step. Just like a builder would never build a house without putting down a good foundation, in the same way, we don't want to paint a portrait without a good foundation. And a sketch is a great way to set up that foundation so your portrait is accurate both proportionally and the likeness. So I'm going to teach you how to do that using the grid method. And if you remember from the last step, you can catch up on that now. And by the way, don't forget to register for this series. Register for the challenge. You can do that. I have the link in the description below, realisticacrylic.com/acrylic-portrait-painting-challenge. Go ahead and register right now, and I'll send you a welcome kit. You'll get all the tools you need. I'll send you the supplies list, my palette layout, and then all of the individual instructional lessons like you're seeing here. I'll make sure that you know when the new ones are out. So go ahead and sign up for that now, and you'll stay in the loop and you'll be able to join the challenge with us. But I have the sketch set up here, and that was what we did in lesson number 1. In lesson number 1, we laid out a grid, and if you did it according to the instructions, you would have sealed it with a mixture of 50-50 matte medium and acrylic gesso. So that's acrylic white gesso. And that mixture of 50% matte medium to 50% acrylic white gesso will really set up your grid in a way where you can sketch without frustration. Not only does it provide a really good barrier so that when you try to erase, here's my eraser, so when you erase, you're not going to erase your grid because it's concealed and covered up by that mixture of gesso and matte medium. But it also gives you a good tooth. It gives you a little bit of extra texture and a very flat surface so that when you do sketch on it with colored pencil, it's so easy to erase. And you can see how that colored pencil line just disappears. That's something I discovered back in 2017, how to sketch my portraits without frustration. I tried graphite, I tried pastel. Graphite would end up getting ingrained in the canvas where it became too difficult to erase. And then pastel was way too easy to erase. And when you tried to seal it in, it would end up obliterating and messing everything up. So colored pencil is what you want to use for demonstration purposes. It's going to work a lot better to have the darkest color I have on hand, which in this case is sepia. So I'm going to use sepia. Could use burnt ochre or terracotta. Based on his skin tone, but I'm going to use sepia just so you can see it better on the camera. And we're going to begin. So your first step is to get your reference photo set up. You want to get that reference photo set up to the left side of your canvas. You can print it out. Again, in your welcome kit, when you register for the Portrait Painting Challenge, you will get an actual copy of this that you can download and print off with the grid already put on top of the photo. So that's another reason to register. Again, go to realisticacrylic.com and then the link below, and you'll be able to register for the challenge and get this gridded photograph that you can either print out or you can upload it to your device, your tablet, either Kindle or iPad. In this case, I have it uploaded to my Kindle, because that allows me to be able to zoom in and see all the detail. But either print it off or upload it to your device. And if you want to have a handy way of holding up your tablet, I do have a free course at courses.realisticacrylic.com. I'll have the link for that in the description as well. And then you can go ahead and manufacture very easily your own reference photo holder, for your tablet. So that's what I have here. And so that's your first step to get that photo set up next to your canvas. Now your next step is going to be to take your brown colored pencil, Make sure you have your soft white eraser on hand, and you want to begin the sketch. Now it's very, very important to make sure that you count the squares at your starting point. I like to start on the left-hand side and work my way towards the right because I'm right-handed. So you're going to want to count the squares. We count 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you gridded this according to the instructions, you're going to have 8 squares across and 10 squares up and down. All right, so I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to start my line here. And our first step is to basically outline the subject in. Now I have my timer here just to kind of keep me on track to make sure I don't take too long on this lesson. So if you're hearing that little ticking noise and you see this red circle here, that's my timer, and that'll help keep me on track. All right, so I'm going to start here, and again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you really want to pay attention where you have the lines intersecting. You want to see this as kind of fractions, like you're going from, halfway across, you look at the end point. Okay, where does this line intersect? And we say, okay, it intersects somewhere around the halfway point. All right, the halfway point. I'm just going to erase that a little bit. And you can see how easily that erases with a soft white eraser and the way this canvas is prepared. And then we want the hat to kind of come to the, I would say quarter point. That would be about a quarter of the way over from the left. 1/4, half, 3/4, and then the full. So we're looking at those fractions. And then we want to see where does the hat intersect up here. And I'd say it's probably about a third, 2/3 of the way up from this hash mark to this hash mark, 1/3, 2/3. And we're going to continue. Just making kind of very sketchy lines. It's about halfway across from this hash mark and this hash mark, half of the way over. Keeping the lines very short, just using a very short kind of stroke system. I don't want to put down a lot of pressure. I don't want to do it like I'm graphing a line. I want to just use very short strokes that I can easily maneuver in any direction. If I see I'm going off course, then I can readjust, and later I can erase the lines that are incorrect. So now this hat at the top is intersecting just basically at the intersection of these grid lines. So it's just at that junction. They're all meeting together at one point. Okay, and then we're going to continue the curve going across. I'm really trying to pay attention to the overall curve of the hat. Here it's going about right there. And actually it's going to cut in a little bit before the intersection of these lines. So you can see I kind of made some bad strokes there. That's okay. It's okay to make a few bad strokes. You can always erase them later, so no big deal. All right, and I'm going to continue down, and you really want to keep your pencil sharp. That's the secret to avoid frustration. Get that sharpener. I have a really nice X-Acto electric sharpener that keeps this at a nice tip. That'll make your sketching a lot easier. We're going to continue down, get this curvature here. Okay, notice at this point, I actually had a little bit of a distraction. My son just came in here in the studio. I'm recording this at night, and I realized I didn't pray over him. I usually pray over my children before bedtime, and I forgot to pray over my son. So I prayed for him and everything, and that reminds me, I forgot to pray before I started this lesson tonight. And if I try to keep on sketching without asking for God's help, I'm probably going to be asking for trouble. I need God's help to be able to do my artwork well. So let me take just a quick moment and pray here for this class. Father, I ask a blessing here on this class. Help me to sketch this portrait accurately. Help me to teach it well. And I pray for all the students that they would be able to learn the techniques and be able to paint a portrait. They would just be amazed at what they were able to do. So bless them, protect them, keep them safe from all sickness. I ask this blessing in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so now we can continue. All right, I'm going to continue this line right here, and I can see that point. I'm on track. It's always good to double check. You can get kind of off track on grids sometimes, but I see everything is where it should be. This is lining up here with this point to this point, so I didn't lose my place. And I'm going to continue this curve down, and I want to pay attention to where this brim of the hat falls, and this top part here is probably about the halfway point, bottom part maybe at a quarter. I'm going to zoom out just a bit so I can see the whole thing. Make sure I'm getting everything in proportion. All right, so that goes to about there. Now I want to get just this top part of his hat because that is an important feature in it. So I'm going to continue, even though I could just do the outline. This is a very important line in the portrait, and I want to make sure I capture that. So this, let's see, it should go about to this point, maybe, about a third of the way. All right, just do kind of some sketchy lines just to make sure I'm getting it in gradually, and we can always refine that later. Okay, and now get the outline of his ear. And the hairline going up to the hat, we'll get that in there just a little bit. So I want to pay attention where that falls into place and get that little divot. There's a little divot in his ear. I want to get that. This is going to come down to about there. The grid will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It'll really keep your proportions overall in check, but you still have to do a lot of double checking. You still have to really get the shapes accurate. And so it's a good way of improving your drawing skills without making it too difficult. This is kind of the middle of the road option between tracing with a projector or another tracing system and freehand. And if you can do a portrait freehand, that's the best, but I found that most artists benefit from doing it with the grid. They get their proportions a lot more accurate, and they have, again, that good foundation to build their portrait upon. You really got to have your proportions and your likeness accurate, both things, to have a successful portrait. All right, so getting in the collar area, and I, again, see where this meets up, goes maybe about a third of the way over from this hash mark. So again, we're just paying attention to those fractions. You can see how that's very beneficial to really keep in mind where your sketch lines intersect over the grid lines. Here I'm going to continue this line again. So when I'm talking about the outline, I'm not saying just the specific outline, but some of the main forms too. We want to get those in as well. All right, I think I have the major outlines in. Now at this point, the next step is to fill in more of the detail. We want to start filling in some of the facial features, just the basic features like the eyes, the nose, the mouth, some of the detail like the collar of his shirt. But this is where it starts getting fun as we add in the facial features. I'm going to start kind of working left to right, so I'm getting in the hairline. That's important, just to establish where that ends. Now I have to decide, kind of where his eyes begin, and the grid is really going to help me. I'm going to zoom in here so I can see the detail a little bit better. But I just want to make sure I have this right. We're looking at, just about here. Okay, I'm going to start with the major eye shape, and here it's very important to get in the angle of the upper eyelid fold and the size of the eye, the shape, all those things, very, very important for capturing an accurate likeness. So I really want to pay attention to where these lines fall. And I would say that I could even pull it over just a bit more. I'm going to erase that just because it's such an important spot. Sometimes you can leave the lines like here, I didn't erase it, but when you're trying to lock in those specific facial features, you might want to have that eraser on hand just so you can take care of it if you need to. All right, so now we've got this angle going. Now the second most important angle would be the eyebrow angle. And we really want to make sure that we have that accurate. I would say that this upper eyelid fold can go down a little lower and the eyebrows come down a little lower. Now where does the top part of the eyebrow reside? That's going to be important. And it looks like it's maybe still lower than a third. So I don't want it to go too terribly high. We're just trying to get the overall dimension and form. Now I'm going to kind of get the shape of the eye in. And that point falls maybe, well, that's going to be past the halfway point. So I really have to make sure I don't make it too large. And I'm going to say that this angle could go down just a bit more, because this point is at about the third. It's about a third of the way down, so the angle's going to have to be steeper yet. All right. Now to get the eye in there, we want to make sure we have that starting almost all the way to the top. Now I put down a lot of bad strokes when I'm sketching. I use the eraser quite a bit, and it's okay. I know some art teachers say don't use your eraser, but I think that's why God gave us erasers, because we make a lot of mistakes. Yeah, it's like the same way that Jesus forgives us of our sins and our sins are erased. The same way, if you make some bad pencil strokes, just use the eraser. Not a problem. Okay, I'm going to just kind of get the overall dimension of the eye. I don't want to get too set in it. I'm going to move along here and start getting in the eye socket area. So that would be right here, this angle. And where does that fall? Oh, it's probably about almost halfway there. Almost halfway across these two grid lines. And then the end of the nose is going to be an important area as well. We have another line past that eye socket line. So I want to make sure I have that in there. All right, and then we have this other eyelid fold. We want to make sure that goes up to the top of the grid line going across. And then how far does the eye go over? It looks like it's maybe not quite a third of the way or 2/3 of the way over. It's a little less than that. It's definitely past the halfway point. All right, we'll bring this down, get this other angle of the eyelid fold. So we have the upper eyelid fold is so important to get that in accurately, and then the bottom part of the eyelid fold, want to make sure we have that accurate as well. We have the crow's feet wrinkles going across. And it looks like maybe this line could come over just a bit more. Just a bit more. We have the crow's feet wrinkles going across. And I want to block in with the sketch just the overall shape of his eyebrows. So we want to also see the values as well. That's very important. I'm just going to shade it in to kind of let me know to let me know where it's at, so when I look at it from a distance I can see if it's accurate or not to my eyes. And I want to draw in the structure of the nose, just the top part of the nose. And really pay attention to where these lines fall. So here we have the round part of the nose. This is going to have to come up a little bit higher. Looks like this is the bottom part of the nostril. About a quarter of the way down. And then the upper part. So this grid line bisects that almost. It's cutting almost right through the middle of it. And then we have this shadow separating the nostril area from the ball of the nose. And the ball of the nose doesn't go down to the halfway point, but pretty close to the halfway point. All right, and then the next step after drawing the eyes and the nose would be to kind of block in the area of the mouth. When I say block in, that's more of a painting term, but we're just loosely sketching this in. I'm going to bring this down to a point. And getting the shape of the mouth is very important. The top, the upper lip, you want to get that bottom edge of the upper lip. It's very important to get that shape just right and get the distance between. So to get the likeness, we want to have the shape of the eyes, the distance between the eyebrows and the eyelids. We want to have the angles correct, then the shape of the nose, and then the distance between the nose and the mouth, very important for capturing the likeness. And then the actual shape of the bottom part, the bottom edge of that upper lip. And usually there's a little bit of a divot. It'll go down and then come up again. But I want to see exactly where it does that. And then we have that 3/4 angle, and that's what makes this a challenging portrait to paint, because we have the 3/4 view, and a lot of the features are foreshortened, and the angles change quite a bit. So it's going to make it more of an interesting painting for us to do here, and definitely challenge our skills. All right, so I want to get just that overall shape of the edge of his mouth. Now I'm drawing the edge of his teeth where they come into play, and I want to see how far over does that mustache and the edge of the mouth go to. Probably about the halfway point, so I can bring that out further than what I originally thought. And you'll see a lot of erasing going on here during this sketch, and that's okay. Now I want to draw the nasolabial fold or laugh line and connect that down to his mouth. And I want to get the angle correct on it. I'd say it probably comes out to about that point. And then we continue with the jugal fold, which is much lighter, but that would be this line right here. And that separates his chin from the jowls and jawline area. And where does that fall? Not quite the halfway point. He has a dimple right here. We want to capture that in. That's kind of a different angle than everything else. But let's continue on here with the edge of his mouth and plot that out. And that goes to almost the halfway point between these two hash marks running vertically. So I'm going to make that just about there. And you're going to find that at the 3/4 angle, the mouth is going to be much larger on the side that's closer to you. Okay, in this case, the left side is closer to us. So based on the nose being centered, the mouth is going to extend further past the nose, more on the left side than on the right side. In other words, this is foreshortened and this is extended here. And you're going to find that to be the rule in pretty much all 3/4 portraits that you do. So it's something to keep in mind. Now, we're going to plot this out and get the bottom edge. Now we're doing the top part of the bottom lip and really paying attention to where that goes, plotting that out, looking at the angles, and it kind of dips down just a little bit, enough that we can see his teeth protruding. I can kind of plot that in just a bit as well, because that's a very important shape. And want to plot the edge of his teeth that are visible. There's more that's visible, but the value's so dark it's really hard to see it. Just kind of fill that in. And then we have this outer laugh line, or nasolabial fold. Sharpen my pencil again. And that falls at maybe about a third of the way between these two hash marks. We have the shadow coming down from his mustache. That's an important line to capture. You might not think that's important, but we want to get that kind of blocked in here. So when I start painting, and we start painting together, you'll know where to put that layer as you paint. All right, let's continue this nasolabial fold here. Add another shadow up here and get that blocked in. Just get the value plotted out, and then the line plotted out for the shadow on top of his nose. So his hat is casting a very strong shadow over his face, and we really want to get that delineated. Very, very important. I would say that actually comes up a little bit higher than what I thought, maybe about right here. It's going to go to about the halfway point, a little bit. All right, and then here it's going to go down to about there. And we can start blocking in this shadow from his nose being cast over his mustache area. And I'm going to have to add a little more detail into it later, but for now, just kind of loosely suggest it. And we're looking for some of those major shapes, Here we have a strong shadow coming down. The shadow gets a little bit lost as we get into the mustache. You can't see the definition of it, but we'll come back to that later. I'm going to zoom out just a bit so I can see the rest of the face. And then I want to get the bottom of his chin and make sure I have that going to the right proportion. It needs to be at about the halfway point between these lines going across. That would be these horizontal lines. This would be the point where I want to step back and kind of make sure I have my proportions accurate, and then go ahead and add a little more detail to the features, especially the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. Really get them accurate. But at this point here, I have everything loosely blocked in. I have my proportions overall pretty accurate, and that sets me up then for this next step. All right, at this point, I'm satisfied with what I've achieved here in the overall proportions of the portrait. The next step is to go ahead and redefine some of the areas that need more detail. I want to add more detail to the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. Make sure that I have the shapes accurate, adjust any of the proportions in a minute way if need be, and define some of the areas on his hat and his clothing. And that'll bring us then to the last step, which after that would be adding some more tonal value. All right, I'm really pay attention to the shape of his eyes, and I'm going to actually fill in some of the tonal values a little bit, so we hop in between some of these steps while I'm defining the forms. I also do fill in some of the tonal values at the same time, and that allows me to see what I'm doing, whether I got it accurate or not. So I'm going to have to get in there, really look up close and see if I've got this the way I want it. So when I'm sketching the eyes, I do leave a little bit of area open for the reflection and just really kind of want to plot where that's going to be. Even though it might change as I paint it a little bit, it helps me to see if I have it accurate or not. I get the bottom edge of his eye in a little bit stronger, and also the bottom eyelid fold, which is implied by the thickness between the upper eyelid fold and the bottom. I'm going to define the shape a little bit, so I'm adding some tonal values as I'm redefining these forms, because the shading is a really good way to plot out the actual forms in the portrait. Line is not enough to do that. You also need some shading as well. Showing the crow's feet wrinkles, that's important. And also here I want to make sure they go to where they should, where they'll meet up with the shadow. And really want to get the overall shapes accurate. So here it would be very tempting to want to space out the wrinkles, boom, 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 everything evenly spaced, and that's a very common mistake that artists make. And it's just something we do as human beings. We tend to order everything in our universe, everything in our world. We want to have everything clean and orderly. And we take that into our portraits a lot of times, where we'll make lines evenly spaced apart. But fight that temptation. Instead, really look at your reference photo. You want to be studying it. You want to be referring to it constantly and be looking at that like 50% of the time. So as much time as you're spending drawing, you should also be looking at your reference photo. But really pay attention to those wrinkles and how far apart they're spaced. And I can see that the distance between this upper wrinkle and then the next one is greater than the distance between these two here. So I really want to make sure I have that exact, or as exact. Also some of the values on his hat. Underneath, getting in some of the shadowed area there, just to let myself know that that needs to be painted in darker, and it gives me a good way of seeing whether my sketch is accurate or not. All right, now I want to get this form defined a little more accurately. So we're going to fill this in and shade that in. I want to darken the nasolabial fold. I want to darken under his nose and define that. Darken in this area by his mouth. We start off a little bit lighter and we start getting darker. And we're kind of defining the area by his teeth. And really pay attention to where those lines fall. That's very important. I think this should go maybe about to that point. So it's, oh, I don't know, maybe a third of the way or a quarter of the way from the end. And I want to define some of the shading on his neck and also block in some of these additional things here, like the collar of his shirt. which would come in right about there, and then go down here and over to that point. I want to bring this angle down and get that going to about the right point. Again, really looking at those fractions. And then the shadow falling onto his shirt, I want to get that accurate. We'll look at the other part of his collar as well. And this seems to come out just about at that point. I want to bring this outer lapel to where it should go. And then there's an inner fold here. I want to capture that. Start getting some of the shading under his chin. And getting in this additional light source. We have a reflected light shining to the bottom of his chin and jawline. And I want to make sure I get the point where the main light source meets that. So it is a little bit lighter under here. You can see where you have some shading at this point. We're just kind of blocking that in. And then this shadow that falls from his jugal fold, that's really important to block that in as well. Plus this additional shadow. And now I want to continue redefining these forms here. The shadow going across his cheek, and then the shadow going over this jugal fold. So we have a cast shadow right here and a surface shadow and a reflected light source. You can see that it's darker at this point on this shadow and then a little bit lighter up there. And I want to get that distinction. So I'm going to use a little lighter touch for that. But I want to get that form rendered in there as accurately as I can for this portion of the sketch. There's a little divot. I want to make sure I get that in there as well. The more work you do on your sketch, the better your painting will be. I definitely would say that drawing skills will help your painting skills. If you can do some freehand drawing 5-10 minutes every day, that's going to pay off huge dividends for your portrait painting. Use the grid method, even use tracing if you have to, although I think using the grid is the best for most artists. But get that sketch up there, get into your painting, because you want to paint a portrait you can be proud of. But at the same time, do some freehand drawing, and that's really going to, like I said, pay off in the long run. So it's just something to keep in mind as you work on your portraits, and you want to have this be something you're going to commit to doing, commit to excellence, getting better. You're going to have to put some time in on drawing as well, and it's really going to pay off. But we like to put a lot of work in the sketch because that's the heavy lifting. It's easier to use an eraser than to try to fix things with paint. Now you can fix a lot with paint if you have to, but if you can plot out your sketch and really get that nice, get it accurate, get it detailed, it'll be a lot less work for your paintbrush to have to do. I'm going to get the area of his upper lip, the top part of that. It's kind of obscured because of his mustache, but we do see a little bit of the thickness of it at this point. I want to block in that form a little bit. And I would say it's possible that I made his mouth just a little too wide vertically, so I'm going to just narrow it down a little bit. And I want to get in some of these forms of the mustache as well. So we have a couple divots here. You want to really pay attention to those abstract forms. And just refine a couple of these accessory jugal folds and the little dimple here on his jaw. All right, I'm going to zoom out on that reference photo just a bit. And again, I'm kind of looking at my lines that I've created by stepping back. I want to have just a couple of these mustache hairs sticking down. I could do some of this during the paint process, but it's nice to have this shown in the sketch as much as possible too. All right, still refining some of the forms and filling in the values in certain areas. I am going to pay attention to this band on his hat where that falls. There's a little bit of a band going across, and it's that little dent on the top of his hat. Something like that. Start shading that in. And a little bit of a highlight. Fill that in as well. Just get a little bit of a shading in there to kind of show where I should paint that. When I start blocking things in, I really will have an idea. I'm going to get this left-hand shadow. Again, the light source coming from kind of the front right area. Sunlight gives us a lot of really potential for some very interesting shadows. I'm going to darken in this area of his hat as well, the bottom portion, which is going to be very much in shadow. I'm just going to use the side of my pencil and just fill it in quickly like that. This makes it a lot easier. A little divot in there. And I'm skipping just to a lot of different areas, but I want to overall shade in the shadows so I know when I paint what I'm going to be filling in. I don't have to make this like a complete drawing with shading like I would if I were actually drawing it as a drawing, but I do want to really plot out where my darkest values are going to be. So I'm going to darken this area by his neck a little bit. So I'm going to darken his eyebrows in a little bit more, especially this point up here, right above his eye. This is the darkest spot. So we don't have to draw each individual hair, but rather we want to block in the value. We want to block in that structure of the eyebrows. That's the best thing you can do, is just see the overall shape and block that in. I want to make sure, again, I have this angle correct and just kind of redefine. Okay, I'm going to pull down a little bit of shading here because there is a little bit of a wrinkle that comes out above this main crow's feet wrinkle or concentric eyelid fold. I'm going to darken his eyebrows at this point. This is going to be darker in value as well. And that's going to come down a little further than what I have. And I'm going to define the bottom portion of his eyelid, these wrinkles here underneath. and define this shape a little bit more on the shadow here by his cheek. We have a nice shadow going across into the cheek area. I want to start filling that in. And then also we have an additional wrinkle below this accessory jugal fold here, and it's a little bit lighter. We want to plot that out a bit. It goes about to right there. I'm going to darken this shadow underneath his chin. And this is going to come up a little bit higher right there. Now there is a little transverse wrinkle going across on his chin. I want to capture that. And that's pretty faint, but we want to get that blocked in. I'm going to darken this tooth in a little bit because that's almost black. It's a very, very dark gray. I'm just defining some of these forms a little bit more. The neck and some of these wrinkles, I'm just darkening a few of the creases. This wrinkle here by his Adam's apple, we're going to darken that. And then I also want to get this shadow coming from his collar and redefine the outer portion of his neck. This shadow comes in about that far. All right. And I'm just kind of going over a couple spots, like his mouth a little bit more. Redefine some of the edges here on the collar just a little bit more. I'm going to zoom out so I can see the shadows. There's a shadow coming down just from this edge of the collar. I want to get that in. All right. And then we have a shadow that's going to be flowing from the bottom of his collar. I want to get that in there. This form right here. And some of these wrinkles are important, and these shadows. So I'm going to plot this in just by filling that in. There's a shadow coming directly below the collar, and it's a little bit darker in value than this one here. So I want to get that form in, and I want to get the specific shape that flows along. Kind of flows like this, and then it goes down. There's a divot, and each of these divots then describe the contours on the wrinkles of the clothing. So you want to pay attention to those little divots. And it intersects at this point right here. I want to make sure we have that shadow. And then we have a shadow going here, coming up, and fill that in as well. Redefine the edge of the collar. I'm going to fill this in, just shade it in quick. All right. I step back and just see that I have everything the way I want it. See if there's anything I need to address. I want to add a little bit more value work up here, just to make sure that I really have this defined the way it should be. The brim of this hat comes up a little bit higher, and then this drops down, and I think the ball of his nose comes up a bit higher as well. So I'm just going to redefine that form. Also, it's possible his nose just goes a bit more to the left than what I have it. So this is a good time to redefine some of those forms that need it. And then the shadow here from his hat should come down. Then there needs to be a little bit of a gap then between this break in the nose and then the shadow of the hat. And I was oversimplifying that, and I didn't see that there is a gap between this form here and the top of the nostril. But now that I have that in, that's more accurate. I want to get this form as well, showing the actual thickness of his nose, showing that nasal bone, and then we have the eye socket around it. And I think that line needs to come up just a bit higher. This line would come. And I'm just going to bring up this upper eyelid, the bottom part of the upper eyelid, fold a tiny bit. Darken this line a little bit as well. And it's very important to have this separation here between this Adam's apple area. You see how the line goes down and then it jumps over and it comes down a little bit further to the left. It doesn't just go down smoothly. It has a little kind of a jog there, a little jagged area. And then that just shows that the wrinkle has some depth to it. I'm going to add a little bit more to the transverse forehead furrows. That would be these kind of worry lines, these wrinkles going vertically. I want to just deepen them in a little bit more. All right, we're going to deepen this wrinkle just a little bit in this jugal fold. Just redefine his eyebrows a little bit more as well. Okay, I just want to step back again and look at it, make sure everything is accurate as I can get it. And just add a couple final finishing touches to define the forms on all of the features. Add a couple additional wrinkles. Just want to get these last angles here showing the background. Some kind of a building out of focus. I'm going to plot that in really quick. Looks like that shape goes roughly like this, cutting in on the upper third of this square. And then it intersects that junction. And goes a little bit below the corner. You never want to have a line going below the corner. You want to make sure that you don't have any lines in your portrait ever intersecting with the corner. That creates an awkward juxtaposition of shapes. So it's good to have an angle going below. And fortunately in the photo it does. So we can just basically draw what we see in the photo. Now here we have this other angle, and that kind of intersects at this point behind his hat, goes slightly above the halfway mark, it looks like, and then something like that over here, a little bit below the other line, maybe just a bit lower, and it's a little out of focus, and I'm just going to kind of shade that in just to represent that that should be shaded, and I'll shade in that as well. And again, it'll be somewhat out of focus. And I'm just going to add a little bit of the darker value here that's contrasting his face. And that would be that area right there in the reference photo. And I have my colored pencil at an angle, and I'm just basically using a little bit of cross hatching, and that's strokes going one way and then the opposite way overlapping. That's just a drawing technique. It helps you to cover ground a little faster and get a more even blend on your shading. I'm going to add a little bit of shading up here as well to suggest that other value. And yeah, I think we have a finished sketch. So there we go. We got the sketch finished, and at this stage you can look back again and really, be proud of what you've accomplished. This is no easy undertaking. When you're doing not only a portrait challenge like this, but you're committing to creating a firm foundation for your sketch, or for your portrait, I should say. When you're committing to creating a firm foundation for your portrait by doing an accurate sketch, you're going to find out what you're made of as an artist, and you're made of a lot. You have a talent within you. That's why you're doing this challenge that God put in you, and you're going to be amazed at the portrait you're going to be able to create through this series. I'm excited to see your progress as you post it in the Facebook group, as you post it in the school, anywhere else where you're able to post your portrait progress. I'll be excited to see what you've been able to accomplish. And this is where we're at. So we've got a good sketch, we've got a good foundation to build upon. What we're going to want to do after this is seal in the sketch, and that'll be coming up in our next lesson, lesson number 3, as we dive into the painting process. And I look forward to meeting you there. Until then, enjoy this. Let me know how this is working for you. Post in the Facebook group. Shoot me an email. Keep in contact on your progress. I'll be happy to help you with anything that I can. And then if you like this video, of course, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to this YouTube channel for more tutorials like this. And again, if you haven't registered for the challenge, make sure you do that at realisticacrylic.com. And I have the link here on the bottom of the page here on the screen, and then in the description for the video as well. So thank you so much for watching this. Look forward to seeing your work in the challenge. Virtual high fives. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.